And welcome back to, let's see, the new series of our traditional weekly live stream of Fuelarts Art and Tech webinar series. We believe you've already downloaded and enjoyed our report, which we published exactly 1 week ago. So if you haven't done so, please go to our website, fuelarts.com, and receive your free copy. So, as I've said, we are starting a new season, the fall season of Fuelarts webinars, and our mission remains the same. We're mixing the two worlds together, the world of art tech startups and venture capital. And today we'd like to introduce you with one very interesting startup called ARSNL, digital studio and marketplace. So what's interesting to mention, ARSNL was born out of Artistry Society, a 35-year company that guides artists through copyright and intellectual property matters, providing licensing experience, legal support, advocacy, and educational outreach. And I'm happy to present as the honored guest of today's webinar, Katarina Feder, the founder and CEO of ARSNL. For the last 5 years, Katarina has been director of business development at Artistry Society. Also, Katarina maintains a monthly advice column on ArtNet, which is called Know Your Rights, where she answers questions on matters of intellectual property and more. Hi, Katarina. Thanks for being with us today and sharing your experience.
Hi, Denis. Thank you so much for having me. And Sonia, thank you both so much for having me. And hi, everyone. Thanks so much for being here. I should note, by the way, guys, I'm a little frenetic, and it's a little frenetic because our sale starts in about an hour on ARSNL Art, our launch. So, I'm happy to be here with you all, but there's a buzz in the office. So hopefully that.
Yes. Additional. We additionally appreciate that you agreed to join us at the day of your actual launch. So we wish you success and hope that helps you a bit. So yes, sure. My charming co-host today, as always, is Sonia Stubblebine, the project manager of Fuelarts.
So, hi everyone. So let's start this.
Let's start with your background, Katarina. With your background in literature and traditional art history. So why have you decided to pursue your career in intellectual property rights?
Sure. So this answer, it's a bit of a nepotistic one. My father actually founded Artistry Society 35 years ago, and I was working for ARS, kind of doing merchandising, and not in a very serious way, to be honest. And that was probably about, I was in my mid-20s, 8 or 9 years ago. And then I decided to go to business school, sort of for lack of something better to do at the time. And as everyone was recruiting to get different jobs, I don't know how many of you have been to business school, but it's unnecessarily frantic, the whole entire process. And as everyone was recruiting and going through all of that, all these jobs sort of seemed, at least to me, a little bit miserable. A job at Artistry Society seemed a little bit safe and maybe not very exciting. But I thought, look, I have an opportunity here, let's see what I can make of it. And really, when I got to the company then, after having graduated business school, there was no position of a business development before. It's a very stable company. It's done really well and, continues to grow at a very nice pace every year. But there was no one that was sort of consciously trying for growth. So, yeah, I saw a hole there. And that's how it was born.
Right. And how would you describe your overall experience of leading business development for this company?
I mean, I think it's amazing to lead business development for something. You really get to see, it takes a certain type of personality, I think. It's somebody who doesn't mind putting themselves out there, which obviously translates very well to also the entrepreneurial space. It almost is kind of entrepreneurial, running business dev for a small company as well that's never had it before. I just kind of really put myself out there in any way possible. I mean, the ArtNet column is a good example of that. COVID was starting people needed content and more content, magazines. So I got in touch with them, and that turned into really what's grown into, I mean, it's a lot of work, but it's an advertisement for the company every month as well in ArtNet. So yeah, I mean, I loved it. And of course, it led me to what I could never expect, which was this huge proliferation of NFTs in, you know, the art world. Obviously, NFTs had existed before, but with that Beeple sale, that's really how, you know, that catapulted this part of it, and really allowed me to sort of run with things.
Cool. You've mentioned NFTs, so let's jump to the digital part of your activity. You know, from our experience, we realized that a lot of people, especially nowadays, that they simply forget that NFTs have the, I mean, were created as a legal term, first of all, because before they became hype. So what was your first encounter with blockchain and NFT, and why has the Artistry Society expanded its efforts into the digital space?
Sure. So my first experience, I'm so sorry, let me just mute my computer, that just buzzed, sorry. So my first experience was actually in business school. I went to CERN and at NYU, and they're sort of very forward about these things. So I was lucky enough that even in 2016, 17, they were offering classes on this. I did, for one of the classes, a large paper. I'm not saying it was any good, it really wasn't, but a large paper on, you know, the ramifications for the art market. But what that did do was it forced me to read a lot about it. And people like Jason Bailey, you know, were talking about what the legal implications can be. Jason now wrote our curatorial exhibition statement for this Frank Stella show. So that was like a really nice full circle moment for me. But ARS itself, Artist Rights Society, has been advocating, and when I say advocating, I don't just mean like vocally, I mean actually like writing the checks for the lobbyists in Congress for the Resale Royalty Act. I don't know how many people here are, you know, American based versus in Europe, but in Europe, there is something called a resale royalty or a droit de suite, which is given, it's small, but there is a percentage that's capped, relatively low, that is given to artists when their works sell in the secondary market. We, of course, don't have that in the States, so in kind, it makes sense. In Europe, American artists are not given that either. So this is something that we, again, have been, you know, lobbying Congress for and financially supporting for a long time. Legislatively, nothing has happened. And then suddenly there's this private sector that has embraced this without anyone telling them to. I mean, not even embraced it, sort of almost invented it. That was extremely attractive to me. And again, to mention the sale that's going on right now, which is with Frank Stella, that has been a big mission of his as well. He has lectured a lot on resale royalty, and that was part of what really drew him to doing NFTs. And then, of course, sorry, from the business experience, it was that Beeple sale. Everything changed after that. You know, Christie sells something for $70 million. Suddenly everybody, you know, wants a little bit of the action.
Sure, of course. It's very interesting to actually, when we interview people, to get to this question when we ask about first encounter with NFT, and everyone is obviously talking about Beeple sale, and everyone is actually having very different reactions towards that. Everyone got very different emotions about and different thoughts.
Yeah, I mean, sorry, you were muted, so I didn't hear the first part of your question, but I think I get it more or less. It's interesting. It's not just people in art. Like, look, if you see a piece of art on the street in Times Square that you don't think of as fine art, no one gets really angry about it. People get really worked up about this stuff. And we're based in New York City, which is a very art heavy and finance heavy city. Friends of mine in finance, their reaction to all of this is so sort of violent. I mean, not just Beeple, but the whole movement. I really think that that signals something that's good in a way. Like, there is a reason that it upsets people. There's something I think that we can sense that is disruptive about this, whether or not for the art market, how long that continues. But there's something here that I think, you know, the toothpaste is out of the proverbial tube. And I think that, yeah, it just freaks people out that they don't quite understand it. The irony is that you don't need to understand the mechanisms. I mean, I always use the same old analogy, but like, I don't understand how the internet networks, frankly, you know, and I've been using it since I was a child all the time. We're using it right now, and I have no clue how this is working. I think the technology of the blockchain is so clunky right now that obviously the user experience isn't there. Those who tend to use it are people who are more knowledgeable about the space. But theoretically speaking, if this Web3 were to continue, this movement, I would predict at one point you would be using it without even knowing you're using it, essentially, you know?
Absolutely. I actually want to get closer to your company and ask, how do you see the overall mission of your company? How would you describe that?
Sure. So, you know, as Denis pointed out, we're coming from Artist Rights Society, you know? So our strength obviously has been 35 years of representing the intellectual property rights of traditional artists. And we have about 120,000 artists that we represent because we're part of a larger consortium. So we have reciprocity with other countries. We're the ones in the US. So our strength and my background really is in the connections in the traditional space. And we happen to have a ton of incredible architects, people like Frank Lloyd Wright and Calatrava, to name a living one, sculptors and photographers and mixed media, you know, of course, painters, people like Picasso and Matisse, performance artists like Marina Abramovich. These being our bread and butter are sort of the logical way for us to start. But what we wanted to make sure of was, you know, this. Right now, we're in a different place in the market. But 6 months ago, it seemed like you could put anything out there and it would sell. I actually don't think that would have been a good time for us to enter the market, by the way. I think that this stuff is a little bit too, I wouldn't say challenging, but more interesting than the market. At the time, it was such a frenzy that to break through it seems like a very, very daunting task. One that we were up for, but then in June when we were going to launch, the market tanked. So we're like, we'll hold it off for a couple months. But to get back to your original question, what interests us in working with traditional artists is taking concepts that were there already in their practice and for some reason could not be exposed before this technology, or maybe rather this technology allows it to be exposed. So in the case of our sale with Frank, Stella, you know, he's obviously the most iconically known for his minimalist paintings in the late 50s and early 60s. 60 years, this man has been creating work and hasn't stopped, like critics be damned, you know, changed his practice in the late 80s, early 90s, really, you know, migrated, then changed it to sculptural practice. And when he did, a kind of lesser known fact is that from the beginning, he was working with computer aided drafting, with CAD, and with 3D printing. So his works have always been like the works that we're selling today. These were not created for the show. They're unique to the show. They'll never be minted again. They've never been, you know, physicalized. But this is the first time that Frank gets to sell his work in its digital form. And of course, we've allowed purchasers to then 3D print the works for personal, non-commercial uses. But that to us was extremely interesting. You know, by way of comparison, we have a couple of architects who, you know, are again very well known, some deceased. Some of these architects have built whole city plans that were theoretical, you know, that were never meant to stand up physically, but they can stand up physically in the metaverse, of course. So looking for things like that. And then, of course, as well, embracing crypto artists too, particularly in ways of collaboration, which we're lucky that a lot of amazing artists want to collaborate with these traditional, you know, properties that we have.
Thank you, Katarina. You know, you've mentioned that you're launching ARSNL in interesting times. And if we look back into the past, I mean, into the experience of our predecessors, so we can see that the most successful NFT marketplaces and studios were launched during the previous crypto winter. I mean, from 2018 to, let's say, fall of 2020. So now we are experiencing the second bear market trend. I mean, the next bear market trend. So maybe there is a good chance for you to become the new unicorn, because nowadays it's all about community. I mean, during the economic turbulence, you can enrich your community because you are staying friends with them. So regarding your, let's say, market colleagues, I don't want to call them competitors, but my next question would be, how does ARSNL stand out among the other NFT platforms as soon as you say that ARSNL is a design studio? So yes, as a digital studio and marketplace. So how does it stand among the other marketplaces or among the other digital studios?
So it's funny, I'll tackle the first part of that, which you mentioned that a lot of the players that exist today were actually formed during the bear market, not during the height of the market. A couple days ago, we got some press that you needed it was paywalled. And so the question was, do we just put it up as a PDF? And I said to somebody who's handling our marketing, like, you know what? And I realized it, like, I cannot tell you how many NFT platforms I've seen come and go over the last 18 months. It seems like the art world's rooting for us. Let's do everything above board right now, and not fuck things up just from being impatient. But the reason I'm saying this, of course, is again, it reminded me just how many. I mean, I was in Art Basel last year not in Basel, in Miami. And it really felt more, and I've been going for years, of course, I've worked in the art market. It really felt more like a crypto convention than it did an art fair. And there were so many companies. I mean, the parties were probably, a couple $100,000 every night that they were spending on performers and venues and this, that, and the other. And I can't name any of them really that are still here. All of those were funded. People seem to be giving money, hand over fist back then. But I don't think a lot of them had any sort of long-term vision. And I think also, maybe more importantly, they didn't really know how to treat the artists who were doing projects with them, many of which are members of ours. So, I kind of know this firsthand. So I think a really big differentiating factor, and by the way, I don't know if this is a smart business decision, like this might be something that we'll have to retweak eventually, but is that we have really taken the stance of putting the artist first. So for this sale, Frank wanted a 10% royalty. I mean, we're so gung-ho on royalties. So of course we're thrilled, but we're doing a 10% royalty. Like, we really let him set all of the terms around this, which I cannot think of any other marketplace that is, doing something like that. And I think that, we are born out of 35 years of work here. It is a more kind of thoughtful operation, not to say that others can't be hugely successful, but I think that these really are differentiators in the marketplace. I mean, even the amount of press, and I know Frank Stella is Frank Stella, so, he should be getting the press himself, but the amount of press we've been able to get for this show, and I don't know if it'll sell out like some shows, have been selling out in 5 seconds. But we were in Forbes this morning. Not many NFTs make it to a Forbes article, the morning of their sale. So yeah, I think that there is a certain thoughtfulness and a sort of respect to the old guard while embracing this newer one that is a differentiating factor. Another just anecdote I will share is that for our pre-sale, we sold sets as well as individuals. So people were able to purchase the full set. It's 20 individual works that are being sold. And then there's 2 extra that were gifted to set collectors. And several of these set collectors were not people who ever had a crypto wallet, ever bought NFTs. This appeals in some ways to an older audience, to some of Frank's traditional collectors. And holding their hand through that process. I mean, we're planning on probably publishing a small book of, 50 editions to send to each of those set collectors after that Frank signs, things like that art collectors are used to from the traditional world, but that crypto companies don't do, I think will stand to be a differentiating factor for us too. And it's a huge market of people with disposable income who love art, who are perhaps over 40 or over 50 and have not yet been collecting NFTs, but want to be ushered into that space. They're reading about it. They're interested in it. So I don't think people should ignore that sector.
Oh, absolutely. And I was actually curious because we talked about with many different speakers, what do you think are the factors that are actually stopping these people to get into NFTs? What are the barriers they're actually facing?
I think it's intimidating, to set, but it's funny. I gave a talk last year and there was an artist on there, and she said something that I thought was really smart, which was that when I was 18 years old and I went to set up a bank account, it was super intimidating. Like that first time you go to Chase and talk with the teller, it's not all that different from that. It's just something new. And then because there isn't any interaction with the person, that becomes scarier. I mean, my God, we've been trying to get in touch with OpenSea, and we have people on our staff who have connections to them. And it's taken, 10 days to try to get somebody on the phone. So that in itself is very frustrating for another generation, if not for us. So I think all of those factors sort of are, they're barriers to entry that will get solved eventually.
Absolutely.
You know, that's funny, Sonia, that you've mentioned this fact. I've got some info right now. So the info is it's rather fresh info. So according to ArtTech report 2022, 85% of all the NFT owners also collect works in the traditional art market. But at the same time, only 5% of physical art collectors surveyed by Artsy for Art Collecting report recently published said that they had purchased an NFT. So we can say that the disproportion, like 85% and 5%. So the disproportion of these figures, in my opinion, it represents key challenges for the industry in the future. And my question to you, Katarina, what's your solution? I mean, how do you feel? How can ARSNL help with that? I mean, to increase the interest of buying traditional art from to buy digital art, because we have the gap in the digital, in the physical collector's mind.
So the statistic for us would not be like that. It would be much heavier weighed onto traditional, I mean, people who collect traditional art as well. And also we've had a lot of kind of like converters here, people who have never bought an NFT before. The strength in that was in these sets. You know, if you have $10,000, which I'm not trying to belittle that, that's a lot of money. But if you have $10,000 to spend on a suite of Frank Stella works, you know, they know who Frank Stella is, you know, some of these people could maybe afford a Stella, many could not. But that is something that obviously has their ear and has them very interested, and something that we did privately in order to keep the integrity of the editioning. And that was a huge thing too. You know, it was me actually getting on the phone with people who were having inquiries and, you know, talking with them about it. We also did a physical event around the Armory. We rented out part of Frank's former studio, in which it's landmarked. There's a big plaque outside. He sold it a couple of years ago. It's now a dance studio. But we rented out part of it, and we had a 3D printing station. We had works that were suspended and also on you know, stands, so that people could actually interact with the physical as well. And the 3D printer was such a hit too. Like, people watching this, it was mesmerizing. So I think that sort of connection to, of course, the traditional art world in the form of Frank Stella, and then additionally having those physical things and actually being present to speak to clients, that's a huge thing.
Actually, coming back to Frank Stella, I was curious, how did you make this decision, and like, what was your thoughts behind actually choosing him?
Sure. Well, so we sent out a newsletter last summer, you know, saying that, like, yeah, from ARS, this is before ARSNL was formed, letting everyone know, you know, we're on top of this. At least that's what we were saying. We're on top of this. You know, we're figuring this out as you are. If you have any questions or thoughts, let us know. And at the time, it was not yet my stated goal to start my own company. I thought that we would be able to do this through ARS and through other platforms. Frank's studio was one of many that called. They were not the only ones, but what, again, I found so interesting about it was the fact that these works do live digitally natively. That felt like something that had a lot more, and like, by the way, like, who am I to say any of these things? It doesn't matter my opinion, but my thoughts were like a lot more like integrity than just taking a Picasso and putting that, and if the Picasso administration asked me to do this, I would jump for joy and absolutely try to sell a Picasso NFT. But, you know, this seemed like a lot more of an interesting thing than, and also with a huge name and with a living artist and one sort of, you know, at the, we'll call it the golden age of his career. All of those things. I mean, I thought it was fabulous to do something with an 86-year-old, you know, who's doing something for the first time in a new medium. Like, how exciting is that? So yeah, all of these were factors in it.
Thank you.
Of course.
Thanks, Katerina. You know, you've mentioned Picasso. You don't know the fact that, I mean, but we at Fuelarts know, as soon as we're looking through a lot of applications, a lot of elevator pitches from young startups. So roughly speaking, 7 of 10 art-related startups who are trying to impress investors with their investment deck, they take Picasso.
Mm-hmm.
They say, okay, let's fractionalize Picasso. Let's sell Picasso as NFT. Let's store Picasso. Let's transact. Let's put it in auction. So Picasso is number one, and we're happy that you haven't taken him.
Well,
Again,
you guys remember that they did try to put out an NFT, yeah?
Oh, yeah.
Which was not sanctioned by the administration, the Picasso administration, just an heir who is a rightful heir. I mean, the last name is Picasso. But there was a lot of hype. But as soon as the administration came out, they called themselves administration as opposed to foundation or something. As soon as they came out saying that this was not sanctioned, the work never, it never went anywhere, that sale. And I think he backtracked and he was like, no, I mean Picasso, like DJ Picasso, like me, not Pablo Picasso, my grandfather.
But getting back to your investment deck, I mean, I should admit that you as a founder, especially as a young founder of a young startup, you sound very convincing, which to us as an investment fund also says that you might have a lot of positive investment responses. So my question will be regarding your investment experience. Let's say, how much does ARSNL have raised until now, and when, and how have you been building relationship with your current investors? Because we know that investment relations, I mean, the main word in the phrase investment relations is relations, not investors.
Okay, so last November was something called NFT NYC, which was whatever, like I guess a conference, but the whole of New York, was sort of taken over by these events. And actually my attorney, who works in this space a lot, I was at a party with her, introduced me to somebody who introduced me to somebody who is a venture capitalist. He has a very known VC. And he was very well. First it was like, give me your pitch. And I actually, the pitch for the company came after the investor, like I did not have a pitch deck prepared or anything like that. It was like, okay. And by the way, he was in Hong Kong at the time. Like meeting is at, 12 o'clock or, AM or whatever, 1 a.m. on Tuesday, like we better get something together by that. And he really put us through the ringer. I mean, this was around Thanksgiving. I remember speaking Wednesday night of Thanksgiving at 11 o'clock as well, and then another pitch on Monday. I mean, he was helping us refine what it is that we were doing for sure. That doesn't mean that's what we ended up doing, but I think those are two very different things. As anyone here who's done a deck or started a company knows what you claim on a pitch deck is not necessarily what the real plan ends up being. It's still all just academic and theoretical until you start working. And he was, very kind of enthused about investing. And I even went and visited him, not in Hong Kong, but then he had relocated to Puerto Rico. And sort of it dragged out the conversation and it kept dragging. And I decided that I maybe wanted to move on because it was dragging so much, and it roped me back in. And again, this is a good guy who's now been of a lot of help. But moral of the story is they signed all the paperwork. Finally, the investment was supposed to come through, which was, a sizable sum. And then came June of this year, which the crypto market completely tanked. They were backers of a big currency that totally went under. And so they became a lot less liquid. And this was an interesting conversation, going and meeting with him and him telling me, in essence, we have to put this investment on pause. And I think, something that's sort of important to remember is like, what are you going to do? Like, okay, so they signed a contract. Am I going to sue him? Like what good is that going to do? It really does not matter until the money is in the bank. Now, look, he's tried to make up for it a lot as of late by sending a lot of collectors my way and so on and so forth. And now would like to lead the round, if they're not as liquid, still lead the round and, raise from other people. I think I would like to keep my options a little bit open at this point as well. I mean, now we'll have a proof of concept and we'll see, how investors react to that. But we are basically being, oh, and I should also note that in June, when he said that, he also told us that he wouldn't do anything right now. Now is not the time to do it. The market is down and all the rest. And I know we'll get to it eventually, but you have one question, which is, advice for the audience. And I think really one of the things to remember is always ask for help, always ask for advice. People are actually really willing to give it. But then at the end of the day, you have to trust your own instincts. Like, I didn't know whether it was self-motivated what he was saying or whether it was for my own sake, but I knew it was going to take us months anyway to get this off the ground, and to wait for someone whose check never came through anyway just didn't seem like a wise thing to do. So we kept trudging along regardless. And, I think that he would say that that was a very good idea. So, but I'm also very lucky, I will say, because I have a lot of resources from ARS. So ARS has really been, and they are a huge shareholder in this entity. That's Artist Society, the company I'm coming from. They have been sort of bankrolling us. We've been doing things much more on the cheap than in the days of the early investment conversations where it was like, whatever, hiring whoever and this, that, and the other. And this is not the way we've done things. But I like the way that we've done things. It's felt right and it's felt scrappy and it's felt like us. So it was a disappointment before, but I think everything's happening for a reason, I think, yeah.
Thank you for sharing this fantastic story with us and with the rest of startups and the investors who are watching us online or review our stream. A bit later, I should remind our audience that in our report, which was, Fuelarts Half 1 2022 report, which was released a week ago, we have several case studies regarding investment where specialists in investment, especially investments in Web3, are sharing their perspective, are sharing some tips with the audience how to navigate for startups, both for startups and for investors, how to navigate in current circumstances. So it would be also helpful to review those case studies in addition to what we've just heard from charming Katarina. Sonia, your turn, your question.
Absolutely. Thanks, Denis. Actually, I want to come back to ARSNL and ask the question about the artists, because you mentioned today that you're working both with traditional artists and crypto artists. So what is the selection process? How are you making the decisions? And how do you choose them?
I wish there was a more formal process. The reality is that we could do something like an open call. But again, I won't stress enough. I'm really lucky because I'm coming from a company that has all of these connections. I'm not suggesting that this is something that you can, generally speaking, start and have all of those. But it's really, I was speaking to somebody a couple days ago who were saying that they were trying to convince this artist to do NFTs. Like, why convince anyone to do this? Like, it is just not a good idea. It is so much work. The artist doesn't do as much of the work as I think that we do on the production side once the works are done. Not to say that, they're not deserving of every bit of credit for it, but it's still a ton of work. Just, for months, these sales go on for, and the whole entire process. No one should do this who doesn't want to do it. So we look for artists who are enthusiastic about it. As I mentioned, artists whose practice for some reason or another lends itself really well to this and maybe could not have been exposed before this technology. And yeah, I think that those are kind of the two big things. This has not been the case with Frank, but I will say for this industry, if the artist has a great social media following, that is a huge plus. It's something that, I don't know, it really bothers me, but it just is what it is. That's the world that we live in.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thanks. During our webinars, Sonia is more responsible for, let's say, the artistic part. As we now understand, Denis is more responsible for financial questions. So Denis will proceed with economics, especially internal economics of ARSNL. So according to Art News, the fee of ARSNL is around 25%, which is a bit higher than fees at other NFT platforms. So what stands behind this number?
It's interesting. That was the piece that like broke the story about us. So it should have been a puff piece. That is not very accurate, the equivalencies that she's drawing. I mean, it is true. We do take 25%. That is true. But the journalist compared it to, and I hope I don't know if she understood that she was making a false equivalence. She compared it to OpenSea, which takes 2.5%. But they take 2.5% as a transacting fee. They're not doing anything for that 2.5%. We are producing and bankrolling the whole entire project for 25%. I mean, even with Frank's works, these works were created before, but they all have to be, we had to make sure from a fabricator, and in Germany was where our fabricator was, we had to make sure that all of these could be printed. You know, just that is a massive amount of work. They were theoretically printable, but we didn't know if they actually would stand to do so. All of them had to be reformatted. I mean, just the amount of marketing, all of it. So while 25%, I mean, I guess it's a quarter, any way you slice it, it is a significant amount of the pie. I really think that it's earned, and a lot of other platforms that are sort of more art-based take around between 20 and 30%. I mean, that is not, that's not much higher than companies like ours. It's just a lot higher than something like OpenSea, you know?
Right. I mean, I could compare with this number with the numbers like which were mentioned in Art Basel and UBS report. If I'm not mistaken, last time it was in 2020, where they discovered the dealer's share in the physical world. So they said that the most common dealer share is between 30 and 50%. Yeah. So the share of ARSNL, and if to be correct, it's like maintenance. Yes, maintenance fee is lower than.
Yeah, certainly galleries take about 50%, which is crazy. I think that there's been this sort of big move to subvert the gallery system. And I will say, to galleries' credits, they do a lot of work for the amount that they, make. I mean, they really do. And they spend a lot of money on building up artists and all the rest. But 50% is a tough pill to swallow. And I think that is part of the reason that a lot of traditional artists are super interested in this space. And of course, then with resale royalty, I mean, it sort of changes the whole entire game, because it's no longer about just selling, something once. It's really about how you sustain the interest. And that as well, Denis, to answer your question, it's not like, well, today, which, again, everyone should go to arsenal.art after this and buy themselves a Stella, but it's not like today, after this sale is done, that this work is done. People expect a lot more, and a lot more of this like community and ongoing utility and all these buzzwords that you've heard. They expect this from these projects. It would not be the case in the analog world if you were selling something.
Thanks.
Of course.
Thank you. I also want to switch our attention to the future. Like, where do you see ARSNL in 5 years, and what's your vision for that?
I would be so arrogant to have a vision for the future for blockchain in 5 years. You know what I mean? I have absolutely no clue. The dream, of course, is to be still creating incredible things and to scale that up. Those things, I think, are in some ways opposed. It's very hard to scale and keep a certain level. And by the way, this is our first sale, so it's not like I'm an expert here, but I mean, I guess I've been brought here as hopefully an expert, but you know what I mean? Like my experience hasn't been long enough in this, but the market has been so crazy. Last year, if we were talking about this, it was a totally different thing. I think the best thing one can do is remain nimble, honestly. As I said, like, trust your instincts, be hardworking, look for opportunities, but then really, like, you have a plan and then it's gonna have to get thrown out because things change. I think Denis mentioned at one point, I will say something I'm not terribly interested in, but I don't want to offend anyone here who might have a startup in this ilk. We're not terribly interested in, although things might change, is sort of this provenance play that a lot of people seem to be interested in. I don't really understand it, financially and logistically, how that can work, how a canvas can be associated with something on chain and that be a receipt that travels with it forever. My kind of prediction is that I don't think that that will be massively adopted, but perhaps I am extremely wrong. That's very possible.
Thank you for sharing your perspective. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. I mean, before I ask you the last question, I should comment on the provenance. I mean, being an art economist, I realized that in terms of, let's say, art finance, provenance means something which increases the capitalization of the asset. By the way, do you know that in Sotheby's and Christie's, the let's say people who work there, they're not allowed to say artworks, only assets.
Well, that is very interesting. I did not know that.
That puts some like a glass between the art and, let's say, business.
Sure.
That makes a distance between them, which really works as we see from the sale results. So in terms of provenance, so in terms of art economics, provenance is something which increases the capitalization. And as soon as all the crypto economy and blockchain economy is profit oriented, as soon as let's say the art specialists will find the way to attach provenance to the physical or digital artworks on blockchain, the crypto community will accept it. The digital community will accept it because it will be positively. It will have a positive reflection on the capitalization, on the value of art. So I'm looking at the digital provenance as one of the, let's say, possible ways of positive development of digital artworks or physical artworks in their digital, let's say, metaverse existing.
For digital artworks, there's no question about it, of course. What I have a struggle with, again, is the physical digital. So, I mean, we'll bring up our friend Picasso again. I've had a lot of advisors come to us, because they have clients who have a Picasso in their possession and they want to create an NFT as a provenance thing. And the reality is that, and this could change, if it becomes culturally acceptable to do so, but they don't want to do that. There's no guarantee that those two things will stay together. And then you have something floating on the market that is a unique NFT. I don't know how you enforce any of this. Collectors of works of a certain price point, like Picasso, or even slightly below, do not tend to be young people. I mean, now there's a lot of crypto money going around, so I shouldn't say that maybe, but do not tend to be people who are savvy with these things. Is this a legal thing that you're putting on them? I just don't. And then what happens if that chain is broken? What happens if someone's maybe going to figure this out? But what happens if you just leave it to your grandchild? What are they forced to declare or not? I don't really know how mass adoption in this would work. It'll be interesting to see, though, as I said, if someone proves me wrong. I mean, there's certainly something there that people are interested in. I haven't been able to make sense of it yet.
Right. I mean, you're absolutely right, as well as what will happen if someone puts, or better say, when someone puts a fake provenance on blockchain, it will remain there forever. So you can only argue, but not delete it.
Right.
Okay, so Katarina, we're moving to the end of our fantastic and very inspiring meeting. And our typical question for all the visitors are, the question is regarding the top 3 tips for young startup founders. So how could you put it together? Let's say top 3 tips for your colleagues.
Sure. One of the things that I kept hearing at the very beginning, again, when money was coming, it wasn't actually coming in, but theoretical money was coming in and everybody was raising money. The thing that I heard several times repeated by friends and by, professionals in the venture capitalist space was that the money will come a lot easier than a partner will. I think it is really sort of impossible to do this on your own. I was lucky. I did not even realize that my partner was here at the time. I mean, he was with a different organization at the time as well, which he was growing tired of. That same lawyer that I told you about, she actually introduced us before any of this. But I really would not be anywhere, I don't think, without him. And I think that that's really, really important. It's impossible to do on your own. Another thing, as I said, I think I've said this already, so sorry for being redundant, but like, have no ego, ask for favors, ask any, call anyone. It's admired, and if it's not, also no one's going to remember, you know what I mean? And by the way, with have no ego, you're going to do absolutely everything for yourself. And I say this as somebody who, as I've said, is lucky enough to have a parent organization that is shouldering some of this burden. And still, no one's going to go open up your credit cards and bank accounts. No one's going to, be the receptionist. No one's going to go get everyone coffee. You are every single part of the operation. So, get used to it. And then, as I said, trust your instincts. It's really, at least then you can say you trusted your instinct, even if it doesn't work out. There's going to be a lot of advice coming to you from a lot of people, and you have to sort of be able to take all of it. But at the end of the day, know which you need to parse out and go with what feels right.
Thank you. That was really perfect.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. And thank you so much, everyone here. I mean, again, if you're fans of Frank Stella or of NFTs, I'd be remiss not to remind us all to go to arsenal.art. The public sale starts in 14 minutes. So, and they're already trading even before the public sale at 3 times the price that they were for the pre-sale. So if it's just for an investment too, flip away. We're happy with that as well on arsenal.art.
Cool. That was a fantastic finish. That was a fantastic short elevator speech assembled in 2 phrases. Wish you and ARSNL great success. Wish great success to your team, which we know personally, and we have any doubts that you deserve a great success.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. And please, if anybody has any questions or wants to reach out to me at all, these guys have my email address, happy to chat with anyone. So please don't be a stranger.
Thank you.
Of course. Thank you all so much. Have a fantastic day.
Everyone, see you in a week. Bye.
See you. Bye.